What's going on, motorsports fans? This is Jared here with the Bearded Garagistas. I am back again. We're going to talk about endurance racing today. I got my buddy Rob, my buddy Tyler on the show with us. So we're going to go over that. If you haven't joined the Discord, this conversation actually came about because we were talking about it on Discord and then moved it here. If you're not on Discord, follow us on Instagram, Bearded Garagistas, and then use the link. And there's an open link to the Discord, and everybody can join and grow the community and talk about racing and get it. I almost hope to get it at a nice size before we start the racing season, and it's creeping up fast upon us. We're gonna go over some the Roar before the 24, the Rolex, and all of WEC, and as much sports car as we can get into right after this. What's going on, gentlemen? How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good. Rob comes to us from his home. Our buddy Tyler, we had to wait till he got off of work tonight, but he is with us. I am very happy. I'm happy that you're coming on the show. I know, but last time I told you weren't going to have a choice. Yes, you got a choice, but I had to bring you back.
Well, I'm glad to be back. It's great. It's great to talk about endurance racing.
Hell yeah. So we got a good list of stuff that we're going to go over today. I know it's Rob's first time on the show. Rob does what you actually see right behind Rob. He mainly does photography, and he's got a bunch of other business ventures that we're all going to get into here shortly and have a good time with, but that's for another time, another show. So let's go over what we got. I kind of pulled up some articles. We're going to try to go over these articles, maybe go over some of the information in them. We'll go over opinions and what we feel about the upcoming season. The first one I have on the list is we're breaking records left and right, it seems, and we're matching records and things like that. This year, the 61 car field for the Roar Before and the Rolex 24 at Daytona, and WEC pretty much matched that announcement with 39 cars in the field. So my question to you guys is, where is the surge of cars coming from? The 61 car field is the biggest since 2014. And yeah, WEC obviously set that record. So where do you guys think everything is coming from now?
Well, there's a couple of things, that it seems like it's really working in everyone's favor. And I mean, one of the largest drivers, you just have to accept it, is the economy. After COVID and, all of these health scares, it's been, such a problem for everyone to get their bearings, and kind of get a compass financially. You had people pulling out, you had a lot of these teams, they're car dealers, they're entrepreneurs, and you don't know what's going to end up happening. You don't know if you're going to go into lockdown, etc. And at this point, we're past that. So you have all of these guys who are flush with money from 2020, from 2021, and now we're coming into 2022, and they want to go race.
That makes good sense.
I also want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I also wanted to point out real quick that the new class structure that's happening with IMSA is really appealing to a lot of pro teams as well as amateur teams. Especially with GTD Pro, we saw a 13 car entry list for that, I believe, which is double what GTLM ever got. I believe the highest they ever had was 8 or 9 cars. And we blew that out of the water in 1 year. And it's the first year for it too. So I'm sure this is going to keep going with an upward trend, but also GTD grew to a 22 car field, which is the biggest they've ever had as well, which
massive
right there, that's almost 40 cars in GT alone. And then, of course, you have the implementation of LMP3, who has 8 cars. LMP2 would have 10. And DPI is about the same as last year, except for the Mazdas.
Damn. That's a lot of freaking cars. Because, is Ganassi expanded, right? Now they have a 2-car lineup.
Yep, that's why it's about the same as last year, because Mazda only had 1 car. Ganassi kind of filled that spot.
Ganassi's
It's
lineup.
interesting to see, sorry about that, to see Ganassi come in for the last year of, this chassis, before they go, hog wild in 23. It's pretty obvious that, Chip kind of wants to end this era on a high note, with a prototype win. The Everybody knows that Chip Ganassi is very competitive. Nice guy, but very competitive. He wants to win. It's just kind of interesting to see him with Cadillac's backing come in with the first chassis, which he got from Junko's Racing after
Right.
their you know, failed bid to break into DPI. I'm not sure where he got the second chassis from. I don't know if that's been supplied by Delara, with Cadillac's, help or whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, but it's been really interesting seeing him, commit two cars in the last season, knowing that the whole formula is going to change,
Well,
in
yeah, and
12
he
months.
he beefed up his lineup too. He didn't
Oh
he
yeah.
didn't he didn't bring in any lightweight racers. He went out there after Magnuson kind of stepped away, and he signed himself some pretty good guys. Um,
Hmm.
If I had to guess, I would believe that the second car would come from JDC because they got rid of one of their Cadillacs. When they got rid of the yellow car, I don't believe they ever raced that again. So that could be where it's coming from. But I also want to point out that I think uh, is it Chip Ganassi leaving NASCAR altogether?
Yeah, I believe he's pulled out completely. I think didn't he sell his operation to Trackhouse?
I believe so, and I think
really?
that's a big deal when it comes to their endurance team because now all of their money is going into their IndyCar and endurance team.
Yeah, he did. That he stepped away. Ganassi, two decade run in NASCAR leaves lasting legacy. Listen, I just want to point out that before we started, Tyler's microphone sounded great, and then literally as soon as he started talking into it, now he sounds like a robot.
Oh, great!
I don't know what it is. It's just pretty interesting. I don't know. Take your headphones out and put them back in to reconnect. I don't know, but it's pretty funny. I was like, man, he sounded so perfect before. What happened?
Mhm.
It'll probably come back.
Hopefully, it comes through good on the recording.
Let's hope so. I don't even if it doesn't, you can hear what you're saying. You just sound like you got a really cool robot voice.
Mhm.
But yeah, Ganassi did step away from NASCAR. So yeah, that opens up room, I guess. Opens up funds, money. I wonder if his NASCAR sponsors kind of made the jump with him. I don't remember who his NASCAR sponsors were, but that would be interesting if we can see if they made the jump with him.
Yeah,
So
and it kind of makes me wonder about, I know this is, we're talking about endurance racing a little bit,
right,
where NASCAR is, and when it loses an absolute titan, like Chip Ganassi, um, how that makes people feel, when they're coming to these huge races and they're seeing somebody who's just been a mainstay and they disappear. Say what you want about, NASCAR, where it's been, where it's headed. Uh, I'm excited that Chip is deciding to focus more on IndyCar, more on endurance racing. Um, and I'm personally not the biggest NASCAR fan, but I would still like it to have a little bit more of a healthier feel, in regards to growth, and it's a little concerning to me.
yeah, they NASCAR. It's weird with how not fake it has gotten, but with how I guess how much they manipulate it. It kind of feels like wrestling. Like it kind of hurts a little bit. They get blood on their face every once in a while, break some bones, but deep down inside, you kind of know it's fake. And
So you're saying that it's a Netflix documentary,
yeah, there's a
like
stigma
they're
that
following around F1 and it's Drive to Survive?
yeah, kind of, but there's a stigma around NASCAR that it's gotten to a point where it's almost like a TV show. It's kind of how it plays out. And
Yeah, and that's what's one of the things that's so interesting about these different sporting leagues is that it's not just the type of racing, obviously, that's different, or the history and the way that they come about is completely different. But the allure to fans. Um, in my opinion, when it comes to NASCAR, everyone has a favorite driver. That driver may jump around from sponsor to sponsor, from team to team, and people are really loyal to that driver. And it's really about personalities in NASCAR. Whereas in endurance racing, you see people who are, really focused on brands. They're focused on legacy. They're focused on history. And drivers come and go, but they'll look back on their favorite team and say, "Yeah, remember when we had so and so back in 2017? That was so awesome." NASCAR fans will have none of that. They want
Right.
to, they're like ride or die with
Yeah.
their favorite driver, and I think that's a big driver towards that dramatic, aspect.
Yeah, they signed. It's more of a. It's weird. It's almost like regulated. The drivers usually stay with the same people for a few years. They sign multi-year contracts and they go to work. Whereas with endurance racing, sports car, Formula One, it's like recently we started getting a lot of like 3, 4, 5 year contracts, sprinkled in. But for a while there, 1 year contracts were the thing. And I know with sports cars, I remember stopping at what is the name of the place? I stopped at a buddy's shop one time and they were working on some kind of endurance racing car that they had in there that they were hired to make this like custom turbo for and whatever. And I remember them explaining to me how their friend from high school is actually he drives for he's driven for Porsche and stuff like that. But I remember them him explaining to me, we were sitting in the shop and he's like, yeah, he's like, every year I got to get my resume together. Every year I go out there and I tell them what I can do for their team. I have to talk to my successes, my failures. I have to explain everything to them just
Mhm.
so they'll sign me again. Even though I just spent an entire year racing for them, they pretty much know everything about him, ups, downs, left, right. But he still has to go in there and almost interview for the job every year. And that's something that you don't really get in a lot of the bigger teams in NASCAR. Those guys are kind of figures. Same with IndyCar. We just got pretty shaken up this time with Hinchcliffe stepping away, and I think Ryan Hunter-Ray lost his seat to Romain Grosjean, things like that. I think I can't remember. Brett's not here to correct me, but yeah. So
Well, when it comes to any kind of racing, it's always a battle not just against the other teams, but against cost and finances.
right,
One of the people who is the most vocal about that on the endurance racing side is Wayne Taylor, of Wayne Taylor Racing. Um, he will regularly come out and talk about how when he was, now he's a team owner, with his two sons, and he will regularly come out and talk about how expensive it has gotten, um, since he himself was a podium star,
right.
back in the 80s, and he was just an absolute force. And now, if you want to field a prototype team just with one car, your expenses are going to be over $10 million a year. And that's what he said 2 years ago. And that's before inflation.
That's a lot of money.
So I mean, the amount of money, man, it's unbelievable. But then again, if you want to win, you got to pay.
Which is true. And what's funny is they come around with e-racing, electric racing and stuff like that to try to help the environment. It doesn't bring down the cost at all. Those cars still, and especially with the technology, that costs a boatload of money.
Absolutely.
I'm my biggest fear is motorsport sustaining that. It grows every year. It gets bigger every year. The price tag gets bigger every year. Formula One just started putting kind of a cap or a soft cap, I guess you could say, on things. Do we see more? Do we see more organizations start putting caps on their racing series? Do we see like cost caps and such? You think that's
Well,
that's something that's going to come down the road?
and I'm sure that Tyler can weigh in on this, but
Mhm.
it's funny because you bring it up, and it reminds me of when Audi and Porsche and Toyota were running their prototypes, at Le Mans, and each one of them are just throwing down buckets of money, billions of dollars in research and development and manufacturing and marketing and fielding these teams, flying them all around the world, doing all types of tests just to win. And then you have someone like Rebellion, and they come in with it's an LMP1 car, but they don't have billions and billions of dollars to spend on R&D.
Right.
So, and they're constantly missing podiums because of it. So when you have a handful of behemoths who have they're one of the largest car companies in the world, Volkswagen Group, and they can just throw whatever money that they want at it, at least before Dieselgate, and then they got decapped, by regulators for cheating the system. Um, but yeah, and
He's
then
like
they got
softly
and
bringing
then we
this
had
up.
what? We had Toyota racing against themselves, and
Mhm.
and they won. Good for them.
No. I agree. And it kind of that sparked actually my it's funny is you kind of led me into my next question, which was perfect. You brought up how Porsche used to be a team and they're coming back, and they did come back with LMDH. They came back with Penske. My question is this: Porsche has been in racing, has stepped away, has moved around, has expanded their racing, um, shrunk it down at times. Penske is not that kind of guy. If anything, he's growing, and he's pretty, anything he thinks of seems to be long term. He seems to get himself involved with a lot of things long term. Do we see this relationship between Penske Porsche kind of fracture in the future and possibly become a problem, or do you think Penske's in for the long haul?
I think it's for a long
I
haul,
mean,
to be
Porsche in for the
honest.
long haul. Apologies.
I mean, Porsche and Penske have had a very long relationship in prototypes. They ran early 2000s with the RS Spiders, and that was a pretty long and successful relationship between the two. And then I also believe that since Porsche has kind of stepped away from their factory GT racing, that they're putting all of their resources into this program alone. And with them not really planning on coming back to factory GT racing anytime soon, I have a feeling that they're really planning on making with Penske, because this is a huge relationship that they could do really well with, especially at Le Mans in the future.
I
Absolutely.
would have
And,
to definitely agree.
I don't think anybody has ever confused Roger Penske with somebody who just does things without research.
Right.
The guy is he's a machine, and he's not young. He is getting up there in years, man.
Sure.
And but he's not slowing down. He bought, Indianapolis. He wants to bring a 24-hour race there, which he has, but he wants to get, some big leagues, bringing endurance racing over. And whenever Roger signs on to anything, it's because it makes sense and it makes sense for the long term. I'm excited to see what they do, and I'm sure that they're just going to be an absolute powerhouse.
Yeah,
Well, why do you think they won the championship back in 2019? I'm pretty sure it is. It took a while, but I mean, he stuck it out. He knew the car was strong. He knew the team was strong with Acura, and he won the championship with a car that didn't look like it was going to do much in the first few years, and they did it within 2 years of the car being out.
And then what's funny is that then there's the story. Wasn't it at the Cadillac 120? Was that the last time that they raced the ARX 05? And they left it in the paddock at Sebring for
Yes, yeah,
for
yeah,
Wayne
yeah.
Taylor Racing to
And it
take.
was a crappy
And
chassis, and they had to buy a new
literally,
one.
so for those of you who haven't been to the paddock in Sebring,
Actually,
it's a
no,
big.
I'm going to correct you real quick. It
Go
was
ahead.
the Sebring 12 hours because the 12 hours was run at the end of the season.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. It was. I remember it being a weird
Hmm.
setup. But for those of you who haven't been to the paddock in Sebring, it's an old World War II airfield. It was repurposed. It's a very cool track, very unique. And the paddock is basically one of the old runways. It's just a big concrete road, and all of the haulers come in. They set up their tents and everything. It's not like Daytona where they have, actual garages. And so, Penske comes in, with their huge trucks. Their team set up everything, and it is just a well-oiled machine, like always with Penske. And at the end, they packed up all their stuff. They drove off into the night because the race runs until about 10:30ish, and they do their award ceremony and everything. And everything is gone except for two Acura prototypes, busted and dirty, just sitting there alone. And then Wayne Taylor basically just walks by and just sees the cars there, and then he gets informed, oh yeah, so they just left those for you, just like they're garbage. And then the funny thing is that they then take those two cars because Wayne Taylor has switched over to running these Acuras this year from the Cadillacs, and they bring them into the shop and they strip them down, and they find that basically both of them have been beaten to hell and back.
Oh
And
man.
one of them they use for spare parts. The other one is basically just absolutely destroyed. And they kind of wondered how it even made it off the track to begin with. And there was a little bit of news one way or the other. Were they using those old Penske chassis to race with, last year, or what? And it ends up that Acura sent them new cars to race, for what? This is a year two, right? Before before they go into LMDH with
Right.
Acura, which has been announced, for 2023. So, that's another team that has a very, very strong connection to a manufacturer. And I'm really interested to see what Wayne Taylor does with Acura next season.
Should be pretty impressive. So now that we're kind of with hypercar and WEC and things like that, I want to go over a few, that were pretty hot topics, I guess we could say, from WEC, and then I want to ask a quick question at the end. So the entry list for the 2022 FIA WEC includes 39 full season entrants from 12 different countries, plus a record number of teams competing in hypercar and LMP2 categories. So real quick, hypercar category comprises of 6 entries: Toyota, Peugeot, Alpine, and Glickenhaus. I'm not even sure if that's right, but it sounds right. Strongest ever LMP2
Nope, that's
entry.
right.
Yeah, that's right. Strongest ever LMP2
Mhm.
entry in WEC history, 15 entries. Chevy joins Ferrari and Porsche to make it a 3-way manufacturer showdown at LMGTE Pro. There's two female represented lineups, plus the youngest ever WEC competitor, who's 16 years old, and they have the joint biggest ever LMGTE AM class with 13 entries. My question is obviously always directed at hypercar first. I know Tyler probably wants to talk
Tyler,
about
does
Chevrolet.
does the Peugeot have a wing or not?
It definitely. I'm so pissed about that. So a few things. I do want to ask also, why hasn't Peugeot, or have they? Because I don't think they have finalized the lineup for a first race. It did come out that Peugeot will need to race at least Sebring or Spa to qualify for the Le Mans 24-hour. I think I would be surprised if they don't go to Sebring with everybody else. I don't know why they wouldn't.
If they don't finalize their driver lineup soon enough, I think they're going to wait it out.
Yeah, it's coming up
I'll,
quick.
yeah, it's only about 2 months away, and if they don't know what they're doing with their drivers, I don't think they're going to do that to themselves.
The
Get the
problem though
cars
is
all the way over from Europe to here to race a track that they've never raced on, or no, that's not true. They
Mm,
haven't raced on in many
I
years
get it, but
with a car
they
they
need
have
it.
no idea what's going to happen.
Also,
Would
remember that
you would
Peugeot
rather do
came
that later?
in what was it, 2011, and
Hmm.
absolutely dethroned Audi at
Audi,
Sebring.
yeah.
Um, I mean, it was incredible that Peugeot can come in with this prototype and just kill it. So if there's anybody who can wing it, it's Peugeot. That said, I agree with Tyler. I think that it's a little bit too much of a too much of an ask to get
Mhm.
over here.
Sons of bitches. Well,
Especially if, well, I think the biggest thing is going to be COVID, because who knows what it's going to be like in March. And if Europe closes again, which it looks like it's starting to do, I mean, they can't even get the car out of the country at that point.
well, they
So
did.
then it would only be Spa that they could go
Well,
to.
but let me mention that we could have wooden carts with corpses stacked 10 foot high, and DeSantis is going to be like, no, bring it on over. Come on, guys, the ports are open.
Yeah, and the WEC
We're
already
not
said that they're
closed.
coming to Sebring no matter what. Because
That's right.
there has been reports of COVID and they're going up, but they don't seem to give a shit. My
At
original
this point, we're
question.
going to live with it. We're just going to have to live with it
It's
at this
true.
point.
My original question is funny because I completely skipped it. Who's going to be the first hypercar LMDH team to take it to Toyota? Reigning champion. Do we see anybody? Do we see? I guess it would be. Is Peugeot, Alpine, and Glickenhaus gonna be able to dethrone them this year, or are we waiting till next year and we see Porsche come in and they might be the ones? Who's gonna be the first team that takes it to Toyota?
Go on, Tyler. I already know what you're going to say.
Well, I'm a fan of Peugeot, but I think with the experience and what the team showed last year, I think Glickenhaus has a really good shot at least beating them at one race. At least, I doubt that
That's a
they would be
success.
second.
That's a big success,
That would
though.
be a huge success. That's one of the first victories in years for a private team, other than Rebellion last year, which honestly kind of looked like a fluke. But I think with the
Savage.
BOP being a very big aspect of hypercar, I think this year Glickenhaus has a real big shot at beating them at a big race.
Yeah, I mean, let's remember, Glickenhaus came into Le Mans, they ran 2 cars, and you have, teams with decades of experience. They can't make it 24 hours
Yeah.
at Le Mans.
Yep.
And they came in 2 new cars. I expected it to be a complete clown show from them. I mean, say what you will about their social media and that outspoken, opinionated voice of their leader, who, by the way, who drops in everywhere on the internet to make comments. You could be at the grocery store and say something about Glickenhaus, and the owner will pop up and go, "No, no, you know what? You're acting like a child," and then he'll just leave. It's amazing. He's
Is this true?
omnipresent.
Really?
He's like,
It's
yeah,
very true.
he is like the Holy Spirit of endurance racing. He's all around us, but you just can't see him.
He's got the loudest mouth out of anybody in the paddock.
Hey, I mean, it obviously brought him somewhere. It's got him success at some kind of level to be able to run a team the way he
Very
does,
true.
and the success that
And you
he's
know what?
found.
Another thing with Glickenhaus is that not only did they finish the 24 hours of Le Mans, they also ran at the top for a long time. I think they ran at the top for the first 6 hours of the race. And I mean, that's huge for any new team. I mean, yeah, you cycle to the front. I mean, everybody changes positions, but they got up to the front very early in the race and they held it for a while. And they also were giving it to Toyota during the race,
Mhm.
passing them on the Mulsanne straight, getting them deep into corners. It was a pretty good race. It just, you can't really beat Toyota at their own game when you're a first time competitor at the 24 hours of Le Mans.
Right.
Yeah, they showed amazing discipline. The technical ability of their team. You can tell that they are intimately familiar, with their creation. They were fixing, they were maintaining. It was just really impressive. I was very pleasantly surprised. I myself, I'm not a huge Glickenhaus fan, but after their showing, I have to admit they absolutely gained my respect. I'm really interested to see um, what comes up at Sebring. Uh, One of the other things about Sebring, with it being that historic track is instead of it being like poured concrete or asphalt in a lot of places, you still have that old runway, which is made of like these 20-foot by 20-foot approximate concrete blocks that they lay next to one another, these
Yeah.
huge concrete pads. And over time, these pads have shifted. Each one of them is up to 5 degrees, completely different from one another. So as you're coming around a turn, you're going pop, pop, pop,
On the
pop,
Southern
pop,
State
and
Parkway in
it
Long Island.
tears those cars apart. Um, I hope they make it through, when they swing on through for the 1,000 miles of Sebring. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they're able to deal with that because
And
it
in the
tears some
beginning of the
suspensions
season.
up.
And that's going to be in the beginning of the season. So those chassis that
Yeah.
they're on and the cars that they're driving are going to have to take them through the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that both of you said that Peugeot is a team that can just kind of jump in and perform, but you did both agree when the FIA set that they will have to compete at either Sebring or Spa. Why? Obviously, we know that it's better for the team, but why would the FIA have to regulate that? Tyler had an idea of why before we started, and that's kind of where I expect them to go.
So my idea was the reason that they make these teams run at other events is because they don't want a ton of teams coming into Le Mans thinking that they all have a ticket to go to the race and they all have a spot to race. And they don't, because every track has a cap. Daytona has a 63 car gap. Le Mans has a little bit of a bigger cap, but the spots are reserved for the teams that actually compete. The full season teams, as well as teams like Corvette that come in and do the maximum or the required amount of races and then go to Le Mans, of course. But they don't want teams that just come in randomly and say, "Hey, we want to race at Le Mans. Here's your deposit and give us a spot." They want teams that are there to compete at multiple races during the year to get more exposure for WEC, but also they want committed teams that are going to possibly be there for longer and more races in the future. They don't want them just racing at Le Mans just because they want to.
That
And
makes
if you
sense.
want to see the fallout from a team that just builds something that's purpose built for Le Mans because they want to win, look at all of the drama that came from Ford when they brought over the GT for the 50th anniversary. The Ford GT was purpose built to beat Le Mans. It's 50 years after the original, the GT40 ended up winning. They wanted to celebrate that. They put everything that they could to build a more or less prototype in
But
in
isn't
a
isn't that the
GT
goal?
form.
Isn't that the goal? Is to build something that's going to win Le Mans, but will take you through the rest of the season?
Well, I think that the
It's
goal
like the Indy
for
500 for Indy cars, right? Your goal is to win the Indy 500. If you win a championship, that's fucking cool. But if you win the Indy 500, you win the Indy 500. And you'll hear a lot of
Yeah,
people
yeah,
say
but
no,
they'll
you
sell out
make
but
a
for
with
that.
great point.
IndyCar, it's all the same car. I mean, everybody has the same chassis. But I get what you're saying. Like there is a certain race that everybody wants to win. It's like Daytona. Everybody in IMSA wants to win the Rolex 24. They want to win that Rolex Cosmograph. They go to the Rolex with a car that's built for it. They don't want to go to the Rolex with a car that's built okay for the Rolex, but great for the rest of the season.
Right.
Right.
So I get what you're saying, but I don't think in today's day with BOP and all the cars basically being on the same playing field, I don't think a lot of teams really purposely built anything for just Le Mans anymore. I think Peugeot kind of showed that they wanted to make a car purpose built for Le Mans, but I think that they kind of quickly realized that that wasn't going to work at any other races, and that's why they added something in the rear end that nobody wants.
And
But I mean,
corporations are
yeah,
still, I think, a little hesitant to throw down that kind of money to, win just one race and then kind of coast through the rest of the season because they are obligated to
Yeah.
by the FIA or whatever, sanctioning body it may be. Um, But luckily we've gotten past that, and these cars aren't just built to perform on a high downforce track or a low downforce track. They're built to compete throughout the entire season.
Yeah.
And let's remember that endurance racing, the original concept, the reason that these races exist is for brands to showcase the reliability of their vehicles and demonstrate the technology that allows them to accomplish that. And
I think the
for an
technology, but I don't
endurance,
know about the reliability of the vehicles. I don't think that's a thing anymore. I don't
I
think it's a
don't
thing
know,
anymore.
man.
Because you don't have
I,
a lot of production. Don't get me wrong, you got the lower classes, and I get it, but these upper classes with hypercar, you're not going to see those driving down the road, right? Like,
but I was told that they take that technology and the lessons they've learned and they pass it down to the lowest model. So by
yeah,
2060, you're
yeah.
going to get that cruise system. In
In your Toyota Corolla,
exactly,
you're gonna have DRS in your Toyota
That's what
Corolla,
I'm
and
saying.
you have active aero too.
Oh,
that's absolutely.
we had this argument. Hey, Active Aero's been around since like the '80s, so relax on that. Come on, you're killing me with it. But me and it's funny because me and Rob had this conversation that we think that the world has been stifled on purpose to stop flying cars.
It's true. It's true. I was told, growing up that there would be flying cars. Anyone I talked to, they mentioned that they expected flying cars. What I want to know is, where's my flying cars?
I do have a question for Tyler. How do we see Corvette racing matching up against Ferrari and Porsche, kind of in their own home turf? We're sending a car away.
Objective opinion, please.
Yeah. I'm not going to
Impossible.
be
That's fucking
biased
impossible.
towards Corvette. I'm not going to say, oh, they're going to come out and beat everybody in every race this year. But I don't know. Honestly, with Corvette and WEC, any race but Le Mans, they really don't do very well. I mean, it's shown that at Coda they did horribly. At Spa, they really didn't have the pace to keep up with the leaders, and I mean it. I don't know if it's the car itself is not really made for the type of tire or the tarmac that they race on in Europe, or what, or maybe because they don't race enough, they don't get the right BOP that they deserve.
Or
But
they
other
don't
than
play
Le
the game
Mans,
well
they
enough.
really struggle in the WEC. So I'm interested to see how they do over a 6 race season. But I definitely don't think they're going to be challenging the front too quickly. Not like IMSA. IMSA they've built their car specifically for IMSA tires, IMSA tracks, um, j- basically for IMSA. So when it goes to Le Mans, yes, it's going to be good because they've raced at Le Mans for 20 plus years. But when it comes to track like Spa or I don't know where else the WEC is going to race at this year, but any tracks like those, they just seem to struggle. And I've heard it's partially BOP, it's partially the type of tire they run in the WEC. It's much different than IMSA. But I mean, it's just
The
they
FAA doing
haven't
it
done
on
very
purpose
well.
because it's an American-based team.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
obvious
yeah.
anti-American sentiment going on.
All right. So real quick, kind of side note, I guess, because I don't know how many of us actually watched the Bathurst 12 hour. The Bathurst 12 hour was postponed. It was set to run February 25th through the 27th. Then they rescheduled it, and it ended up being on the same weekend as the 12 hour of Sebring. So then they pushed it all the way to May. So now it's May 13th through the 15th. They say they've done this because of a COVID-19 outbreak in Australia's East Coast. They're having a big problem with it down there. So yeah, so they just they moved it around Sebring, I guess, smart on their part, because I know a lot of the racers that go down there to run that 12-hour race in the supercars are like IndyCar drivers. I know a lot of IndyCar drivers run down there, so I think that's a good business move. My
Well, did
question.
they
Go ahead.
postpone the Bathurst 12 hours or the Bathurst 1000? Because the 1000 is supercars, the 12 hours GT3
You're
cars.
right. You're right. You're right. It's the Bathurst 12-hour. I'm sorry. It is the
Okay,
GT Enduro. You're right. You're right. You're right.
gotcha.
Bastard. Right again. I always get corrected, and I'm not gonna lie. My head is in so many different places. It's just how we got to go. I have another question. How come? Why? First of all, Glickenhaus is only running one car this year.
I haven't heard much of one car, but I believe it's still two. I believe it's the 708 and 709. I
I
don't see why they would run one.
so I'm looking at
I
I'm
haven't
looking
seen
at
anything about the number that they're planning
I'm
on
looking at the
running.
2022
That's a good question.
FIA. I'm looking at the 2022 FIA lineup. Toyota Gazoo Racing has the 7 and 8, Mike Conway,
Hmm.
Kobayashi, Maria Lopez, and then Buemi, Hartley, and Hirakawa in another car. Alpine is running the 36 with Negrao, Lepere, whatever his name is, and Vax VA.
LaPierre,
They stick to they stick to their French
French
drivers.
names.
100%. They destroy me too. Peugeot. Peugeot is interesting. They have two cars. They have the 93 and the 94 they picked. Paul Di Resta is set in the 93. Loic Duval is set in the 94, but the other two drivers are to be announced. I remember when they made their big announcement and they showed the car for the first time and they interviewed all the drivers and they had like 10 drivers lined up to race these two cars. So I know four drivers for the 24-hour races and things like that. I'm curious to know why Magnussen had to step away from Chip Ganassi Racing if he wasn't already set to be a driver on one of these teams. That's just confusing to me.
Well, what I wanted to kind of point out, because I kind of just realized it, but when you look at IMSA driver announcements, they don't come until about 2 weeks before the season starts. A lot of the driver announcements, I don't know, I don't remember exactly when we did the last show, but the like five or six driver announcements came out like 4 days after we did the show.
Right.
And we're only 5 days from the Roar happening, which means that a lot of these teams know exactly what their driver lineups are. They just can't fully announce them until they're so close they can't go back.
Right.
Yeah, they have the media embargoes, and
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
who I don't understand myself exactly how it works, but the hiring and unfortunately of drivers in any one of these series can be very difficult on
Mhm.
everybody involved. Especially during that off season when so many hard decisions are made. I don't know if the embargo is to try to keep everybody on an even playing field or what the deal is, but just like Tyler said, it's interesting that we get all of these announcements so close to the beginning of the season, with the Roar coming up.
Yeah.
Well, partially, I wanted to kind of also point out that Felipe Nasr, who was just kind of announced as a Porsche factory driver, he's set to drive the FAF Porsche full season for IMSA and the Penske LMP2 for the WEC.
Right.
They announced that a week ago after he was announced as a full season driver. So I think what happens is that these drivers are picked up, dropped, moved around. They signed so many different contracts throughout the months leading up to the racing season that they just can't confirm anything until they're so close that they can't go back at that point.
Right.
Because I think that's why they announced their driver lineup, Peugeot, but they can't confirm them as full factory drivers yet until they get closer to the season so that the contracts are set, that the guys know that they are part of the team. They know that they're going to be there full season, because a lot of these guys could get a call from, I don't know, Audi tomorrow saying that, oh, we need you in a GT3 race, a 24-hour GT3 race, and it's this weekend and it's during the WEX weekend. And they're getting paid more to do that than Peugeot would pay them.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're going to go
And let's
there.
also remember, we touched upon
Mhm.
that we have record entrants in IMSA and WEC. These drivers, or these cars, they need drivers.
Mhm.
And I can only imagine how insane it must have been during the off season for all of these team owners to try to find anybody who was available and who could, turn a wheel.
Yeah, you got people getting sucked up, like Ollie Jarvis got sucked up by United Autosport. Like,
Hmm.
it's really interesting to kind of see the people move. Glickenhaus does have the 708, but I don't see the 709 on the list. And the only driver that they have reported is Olivier Pla, which he comes back from last year because I remember he raced for them last year as well, if I remember
Yep.
correctly.
And they could be doing a one car for the season and then two for Le Mans. I mean, that's not impossible. That
Right.
a lot of teams are doing that, but it's kind of weird that they would go from a two car effort that they showed all season to a one car.
I think it only really bothers you if you're challenging for a championship. To be honest with you, to work as kind of like teammates and things like that. But if they do
Hmm.
they did a 2-car program last year to get their feet wet to learn as much data as they could, and then shrunk it down to a 708 1 car, which is a little bit more
Hmm.
ability for them to handle as a privateer team. That just might have been a business move, and I do agree. I think at the 24-hour, we'll probably see 2 cars come on the track.
It
Yeah,
could
and
have also been a
it's
financial problem with
Yeah,
Glickenhaus. They could have realized that maybe they can't handle two cars for a full season. Maybe they were ambitious and were like, oh, with the cheaper costs of running a hypercar to an
yeah,
LMP1 car, we could definitely do it. But I think after doing a partial season, they kind of realized that they can't do two cars for the full season this year.
sure.
Yeah, and I think Jared touched upon it. When you have two cars out there, you have two times the telemetry, coming in to tell you what's going on, with the chassis. It's the equivalent of running two seasons, on a single chassis at that point. They're both identical. You're going to be able to better find, points of weakness on the chassis, the electronics, etc. And it's interesting that they feel at this point that they're able to come back down to a single car.
LMP2 is going to be ridiculous. A lot of really powerful teams in this LMP2 here. Richard Mill Racing, Team Penske,
Mhm.
Prima Team, which is Robert Kubica and Louis Delatraz, which I was kind of interested in that lineup. Vector Sport sucked up Sebastian Bourdais, Nico Mueller, Ryan Cullen. It's really weird. It's really weird to see a lot of Mazda racing out. Like I said before, Ollie Jarvis got picked up by United Autosport. G Drive is going to be powerful as always. United Autosport's running 2 cars, by the way. You got Jota, WRT. Speaking of WRT, we kind of got into that. Oh, Jota's got 2 entries. We definitely have to talk about WRT. So WRT dominated the 24-hour Dubai. They did it in a car that apparently nobody else wants to drive but WRT. And they stomped everybody for a 1-2 finish. And the car they are driving is the Audi R8. Why does the Audi R8 not get any love, gentlemen?
Well, I want to point out one thing about the Audi R8. It doesn't get love in the United States. There were tons of Audi R8s at the 24 Hours of Dubai. That was actually the most popular car at the 24 Hours of Dubai, other than I think the Mercedes. But in America, you rarely ever see an Audi R8 anymore. It's I think Rob knows a little bit more about the feud between Audi
Yeah,
Sport
Audi,
America and
Audi North America, and
yeah.
Audi corporate over in Europe. They just don't get along. The two have completely different priorities. Audi North America, they aren't as focused on racing. They don't feel that it's that it needs to be as much of a focus. It's just in the end, the two of them just do not see eye to eye. It's kind of bizarre to me that you can have a national organization just kind of go and do their own thing, and the main corporate entity can't kind of like rein them in or do whatever it is. But in the end, I think that we have seen that the R8 is a perfectly capable platform. Um, WRT has been able to demonstrate that. There's no question. I personally wish that we would see more R8s here in the States. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. And you know what? That's our loss.
For sure. Uh, Speaking also WRT, Valentino Rossi has been tied with that team, the GT World Cup Challenge or the World Challenge. Do you think he's going to be? I've seen him. Remember when he switched racing seats with Hamilton, and then Hamilton, I think, rode the bike or something like that. Do we see
Valentino Rossi could race RC cars and be a world champion? Let's face it.
I
The
think
guy is unnaturally talented
just runs
when
in
it
his
comes
blood.
to getting in front
He's
of
ran
something else.
GT3 cars before. He's done this before. This is not new for him. So news of him, news of him racing and endurance racing is not new. It's exciting. It's not new though.
Which is good to hear because I like to see other drivers branch off. We see Jimmy Johnson doing it with IndyCar. We also see Jimmy Johnson doing it with sports car. So I don't mind it as long as they're competitive. I know Jimmy kind of struggles, but he's getting better. He's making progress. So
I want to see Dale Earnhardt in a Corvette next year.
You think he'd do it? I don't know. He's got so much going on right now as a businessman.
He's going and he's testing the next gens and all that stuff. I don't think he's gotten rid of the itch yet.
Fair enough.
If Chevrolet called him up tomorrow and said, "Hey, you want to race in the Corvette?" I'm sure he would.
Bro, who wouldn't? You would.
Exactly. Duh.
Why did I think somebody brought up a Mercedes or something like that, and I don't remember why. But why did WeatherTech split their car types this year? They're running two different cars.
Who knows at this point? WeatherTech has thrown so much money into
it reminds me of that
IMSA.
GIF of like the Shirley Temple characters throwing money out the window.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. So who
WeatherTech
doesn't know
has
WeatherTech?
The money printer, man.
Yeah.
WeatherTech makes rubber mats
and
they sell them for hundreds of dollars and they sell them all around the world. They have a money printer that just sits there and spews out $100 bills all over Cooper McNeil, and he can do whatever it is that he wants.
Naked, no shirt on.
He just rolled over, he fell out of bed, and he's like, "Dad, buy Laguna Seca," and it just happened. So now it's WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca. They have 15 cars. They sponsor the league. Why does WeatherTech do anything? Because they can, and because they want to be the next Jeff Bezos. And damn it, they're on their way.
They must be doing something right.
I can't argue. Don't know WeatherTech. The owner of the race team is also the owner of WeatherTech. So he has all the money in the world to play around with. And his son, Cooper McNeil, races for WeatherTech. So they have money to put probably 15 cars on the field if they want. But I believe
they're like the Red Bull of Formula One.
Cooper McNeil is a perfectly capable driver.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's nothing wrong with Cooper McNeil and everything. Throw as much money as you want at him. He'll do fantastic things with whatever car he's in.
For some reason, genetics still work in a race car. You the Ray Hall family, the Earnhardt family. It follows in the blood. I don't know why, but it does.
Yeah. Well, what I think what happened with WeatherTech is that they began with Proton. They have a contract with Proton Racing, who is generally a Porsche factory team. They run Porsches in WEC. They've run Porsches in IMSA before. So they run Porsche cars. So they bought a GT3 Porsche to run for this season. But what I also think what happened is that they were called up by AMG, who normally doesn't have many entries in the Rolex 24, and they were asked by them to run a car because I don't know if anybody remembered. I know Rob remembers. In 2017, WeatherTech ran an AMG. So they've already had ties to the company, and I believe since they've already run the car and had success with the car, AMG trusts them to run the car at the Rolex as, I guess, to beef up the field of AMGs because they're usually not there. I mean, Windward won last year, which was a huge win for
Yep.
a team that's really never shown up to the Rolex. But
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. You had Windward come in last year in an AMG GT,
I
and
think this MG
they did amazing.
exactly, yeah, and I think that's the reason that AMG wanted to beef up the field this year with WeatherTech. And I mean, WeatherTech's the perfect sponsor to go after if you want a team that can win. One of the weirdest things, though, to me is I think this is the first time any team has run two different cars in the same class.
Well, isn't it three different cars now?
No, it's a one Porsche and two Mercedes.
Right.
So they're kind of a Mercedes factory team at this point when really they were a Porsche factory team a
I
year
was I
ago.
was thinking about their the Ferrari what was it, the 488 that they ran as
Yeah,
well.
the
You know,
one
it
year or 2 year Ferrari 488.
between them and Magnus Racing, I don't know, who's going to have the title when it comes to switching in between manufacturers.
Oh, next
There's
year it will be a McLaren, and the next year when
oh
Corvette comes out, it'll be a Corvette C8, Z06, GT3R WeatherTech
Funny.
car, and yeah, they'll switch every year. I feel like, especially Magnus.
So now this happened a couple days ago, and this is the last topic I have for you, gentlemen. Bicolis entry with Van Wall gets rejected for LMH. Pretty much what happened was they had an entry for 2022. They paid for the full season, and then based upon homologation reasons, because they are a non-hybrid prototype, they haven't completed that process yet. Now, originally when they paid for it, they paid full season with the caveat that the car was permitted to miss the 1,000 miles of Sebring opener and debut at Spa in May. But apparently,
Of course, they would miss Sebring. Of course, the one race we can all go to, they want to miss it.
Yep, but well, it's funny is like when that race is going to be, yet all these teams continue to miss the first race of the season. I don't understand. It's like you had one job was to get the car out of the factory on time, and you fuck it up every year. Like somebody misses it all the fucking time. I don't get it. Like, how do you fuck that up? You know when it's coming.
Well, I mean, when it's a brand new car and a brand new category, I'm sure it there's a lot of trial and error with that.
Did
And
they
I'm
race
sure that
last
sets
year?
them back a lot.
Well,
Bicolis, no, they ran in 2019 was the last year they ran
so
an LMP1
they had
car.
a few years that they took off to get their shit together, and they still couldn't get it together.
Yeah,
Apparently,
true. Yeah.
the company owner
yeah, I mean,
does
even
say, "Oh, go ahead."
Glickenhaus went through the same thing,
Oh,
over
true. Yeah.
promising and under delivering. But they finally got out there. When anytime any team is going to put together the team and the money to field a new car, I think there's a certain element of marketing and showmanship, where they want to say, absolutely, we're gonna get it ready. And then as you get closer, they're like, oh, well, we're dealing with a few lingering issues. And then they keep going and they keep pulling it back just a little bit more until they finally admit that, it's going to be delayed. But, there's a little bit of trying to get the hype out, right?
Yeah.
Trying to not have it completely deflate, and it's a little bit difficult to keep that up, when you're developing one of these you know cutting edge prototypes, that's brand new to the team. So, I don't envy any of them, with that task, but because man, it is hard.
Well, the owner, Colin Coles, pretty much declined to make a comment. They had another senior figure explain that it was surprising considering its early commitment to the LMH formula back in 2018. So they had their eyes on this for a while. They just couldn't get it around.
Well, the problem is that, sure, they could be the first ones to commit to the new class. Sure, they can, hype up the new class all they want, but if they can't follow the rules, then they can't race. I mean, they have uh, a specific set of things they need to do before they can be homologated and BOP'd for the season. And if they can't do all that stuff, then they shouldn't be able to race. I
Exactly.
completely agree with that. But it would have been nice to see them. Sure, I would love to just stick a car on the track and see how it does. But if you don't have a BOP or if you don't know how the car is going to race, then it's not really dangerous to have the car on the track, but it's either gonna be too fast or way too slow, and it's just the way it is. You can't race a car that doesn't have homologation or BOP.
No, yeah,
And
I agree.
it's a little disingenuous, to come out and say, well, we were one of the first ones to, back the hypercar formula. You're basically admitting that you expected some kind of, quid pro quo where, the governing body is going to just say, oh, well, they did us a solid, so let's just let them go and do what they want.
The
The
FIA has
reality
worked like that in the
is
past.
the reality is that they've probably been given so many chances over the past 3 months, and it just got to the point where they got backed into a corner,
Yeah,
and someone had to make the call. I don't think any league, when they are trying to get a new class off the ground, especially one that's been so embattled and in
sure.
development hell as hypercar, they do not want to have a team, not on the track. This is a lose for everybody involved. So but I mean, in the end, they'll get there. But
Well,
it's a shame.
nobody knows really what caused it. I mean, you can partially blame it on COVID, probably, right? So that obviously hurts. Some people
I
blamed
think
it on
part of the
Van Wall.
homolog
Some people
I
are
think
saying that
part of the homologation.
Van Wall wasn't able to come up with their side of the bargain, and that might have caused it. Until the owner decides to speak up, or they have like some kind of rep speak up and explain to us what happened, we're not going to know. But we do know
Well,
that they're done for the
I think
season.
part of the homologation. Sorry, I was cutting you off a little bit, but I wanted to get this out before we went on to a new topic. But I think part of the homologation process for hypercars, the car has to be tested and raced on many tracks that WEC goes to before they can give them a BOP. And I think because Bicolis has never made an appearance with the car since they announced they were going to go LMH, I just think that nobody knows where the car is and nobody knows what to do at this point. That sure they could be building the car in their factory right now, but if they don't have a rolling chassis to go in 2 months, then who's to say that they would even have a rolling chassis to go for next year? Like
Yeah, I mean, well,
they,
they did do a shakedown. Apparently, they did do a shakedown. Some kind of last month they did a quick shakedown, but I don't think it was enough. I think it was like I said, like first couple laps. Like remember how when
yeah,
Glickenhaus was kind of doing that? Hey, we completed 3 laps today, and they're like, you're like, all right,
yeah,
it's three
yeah.
fucking laps. That's probably what they had. I don't think it was enough
Yeah, and
to
that
rate
and
them.
that process is extremely important. As a lot of people who follow endurance racing know, um, pardon me, when LMH and LMDH were being developed, there was a consensus amongst WEC, the ACO, IMSA, that they wanted to be able to see these cars come over and race in America. They wanted to, there was a definite desire for teams here stateside to want to be able to compete at Le Mans. So, when all of those regulations were written, they were written so that all of these cars could hopefully one day compete against one another. And so then you had the ACO and WEC, you know, finally admit the LMDH, and say, yeah, you can come over, you can race at Le Mans, whatever. And IMSA was still kind of holding back a little bit. And the reason that they did was because they wanted to see how these new hypercars perform on American tracks. And when we have the 1,000 mile of Sebring and we have these new chassis running around, they're going to be able to get an idea of what that BOP formula needs to be to make sure that all of the cars, stateside and abroad, are going to be competitive. And that is extremely important for IMSA. That's part of the way that they do business, that they feel that a league should be run. It's one of the things that keeps costs under control.
Right.
And with if Bicalis can't abide by that very important rule, then they kind of don't really need to have a spot sitting there empty reserved for them.
Well, they completed this. They pretty much shelved this year. Do we see this failure hurt them in the long run, or do we see a Bicallis come back and because I mean they've been away for a while, and they've talked a lot of shit, but unlike Glickenhaus, they haven't backed it up. So do we see them come back, or is this possibly the end of Bicallis for a while?
I 100% see them coming back next year. I don't think they'd put all this money in development into a car that's just going to sit in a garage and do nothing for the next 20 years. I think we're definitely going to see them next year. I wouldn't be surprised if they lobby to go to Le Mans this year. They put in a ticket to go to Le Mans. They finish the homologation process during the season. They figure out the BOP and they try to go to Le Mans. I mean, it's just like the thing we were talking about with how teams have to race a certain amount of races before they go to Le Mans. You have to do a certain amount of things pre-season before you're homologated to go to race the full season. And if they couldn't do that, just like teams can't make the fired races they have to do before Le Mans, and they can't go to Le Mans, just like teams can't run full seasons.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that they're able to get the car out there this year, even if it's in a non-points scenario, and get it running, with some of its contemporaries. And
Have they done that before? Allowed a car to run out of the points? I mean, you put a car on the track that could possibly run into another car. Do you want to allow them to do that?
Well,
I can't say, but as long as it doesn't, impact the standings and the efforts of other teams, and I would think that the WEC and the ACO definitely want to have this team, out there competing.
Right.
So if that means that they can get them a little bit of track time, in a non-point scenario, in my opinion, let them. Let's do it. Let's get them ready for 2023 and see what they can do.
Well, the WEC hasn't, not to my knowledge, allowed a team to do a non-points race, but a lot of championships around the world have with the M4. The M4 did races at the Nürburgring. They did it at Sebring. They did it at Spa, I believe. They ran all these races non-points to try and test the car against other GT3 cars. They wanted to test the car in a race situation, but I think if Bicallis can do what they need to do to homologate their car, I think for sure, I think the WEC would definitely allow them to run a non-points race at some point just to prepare for Le Mans. I think that just because they didn't get their full season ticket, I don't think they're going to shelve Le Mans. I think they're definitely going to still try to get the car ready and try to make at least one race before Le Mans to try and punch their ticket in, because that's the end goal. Every team wants to make Le Mans. Even if they can't make a full season, they have to get to Le Mans. That should be plan B every time.
Yeah, so I think once they get past the hurt of these guys have been working day and night to get this program and this car off the ground.
Sure.
Once they get past this failure, I think that you're going to see a fire from them just to get whatever it is that they can out of 2022, and
Sure.
hopefully that means that they get out there on the track in front of some people.
That'd be nice to see. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming out. I had a blast again. Rob, we're definitely going to have Rob back as a staple for endurance racing as the season goes on. I do know you're going up to the Roar for one of the days. I do know you're going up to the Rolex 24. Tyler, I know you're going.
Absolutely.
Sore spot that we didn't get credentialed, but fuck them. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. We'll get them next year. Yeah.
That's what I said. We'll get them. We'll get them. But yeah, so real good things coming down the pipe. I want to switch it up for you guys. Thank you for joining us. I want to thank you again for all the people who have joined the Discord. It's been awesome. It's blown up, and I love where it's heading. If you are a member, please share the Discord, invite new members. Let's get this the biggest Discord community from all over motorsports before the next season comes up. If you like the episode, subscribe, so you can hear us again. We really appreciate you coming out. Thank you, gentlemen. And do
Thank
you
you,
guys
Jared.
want to shout
Thank
out
you.
anything real quick before we get out of here? Any new work that you've done or anything that people can go look at or something like that?
Yeah, there's a fantastic podcast. It's called Bearded Garagistas. I don't know if you've heard of it. Give it a look. Go to the YouTube channel. I'm not going to pitch like and subscribe, but if you wanted to do that, I think it would be really appreciated.
Hell yeah. All right, we'll see you guys later. Peace.